This is grammar lesson 12.4, present subjunctive with verbs of will and influence. In grammar lesson 12.3, you learned how to conjugate verbs in the present subjunctive tense. So today's lesson is a continuation of that, and we're going to continue to build upon that. Today, what's different though is that in your two clauses that you're looking at when we're talking about our main clause and our subordinate clause, last time in grammar lesson 12.3, in your main clause, you learned how to use the impersonal verbs with the subjunctive tense, or the present subjunctive. Today, what you're going to be doing in that main clause, you're going to be using verbs of will and influence. So let's first look at the sentence structure so you can kind of see what that will look like. Similar to lesson 12.3, you have your main clause, a connector, and then a subordinate clause. So in this example, your complete sentence would be, Mi mamá prefiere que yo saque la basura. Notice that your two subjects in each of the clauses are different. In your main clause, your subject is mi mamá, whereas in the subordinate clause, the subject is yo. With this structure that we're learning about today, this is a really important rule that you'll want to make sure you jot down in your notes, that the subject in the main clause cannot be the same as the subject in your subordinate clause. Otherwise, it wouldn't technically be a subjunctive. And we'll get a little bit more into that later. The next thing I want you to do in your notes is go ahead and copy down these words from the word bank. These are some of the verbs that we will use specifically with this sentence structure. If some of these will look familiar to you and you already know the meanings, but if you don't, go ahead and jot down the English meanings as well. So the verbs here for just some pronunciation practice, you have aconsejar, desear, importar, which you'll remember is an impersonal verb, so you would say like me importa or te importa. We have insistir, mandar, necesitar, pedir, preferir, prohibir, querer, recomendar, rogar, sugerir. And you'll notice several of these are stem changing verbs, so you'll want to make note of that on your paper as well. Let's go back to that point I made earlier about how the subject in the main clause cannot be the same as the subject in the subordinate clause. I want to kind of show you some examples which will lead to another grammar rule that you'll want to keep in mind. So here's one example. Yo quiero que ellos vayan a la fiesta. I want them to go to the party is basically what I'm saying. The literal translation would be, I want that they go to the party. We would be more likely in English to say, I want them to go to the party. So that sentence is grammatically correct. What would not be grammatically correct is if I'm expressing that just simply I want to go to the party. You wouldn't say yo quiero que yo voy or que yo vaya, either way, a la fiesta. Instead, you would simply use the infinitive, yo quiero ir a la fiesta. So the grammar rule that this leads us to is that if there is no change in subject, you simply use the infinitive. So you wouldn't use the regular present tense conjugation voy, you wouldn't use the subjunctive vaya, you would simply use the infinitive ir. So that third sentence there that is grammatically correct is something you've been doing since Spanish 1, so that should look pretty normal to you. Here's another rule for you to be familiar with, and this isn't so much as a rule as much as it's more of like a suggestion, but a lot of times you'll use an indirect object pronoun with some of these verbs of will or influence, specifically with the verbs aconsejar, importar, mandar, pedir, prohibir, recomendar, rogar, and sugerir. If you don't want to copy all of those down, you could simply go back to your word bank and maybe put like a star or underline or something by those verbs specifically. But here are a couple of examples of what that might look like when I say that you would use an indirect object pronoun with them. The indirect object pronoun would be placed in your main clause, which is kind of giving you a preview of what's to come in your subordinate clause. So here are some examples of that. Te aconsejo que estudies. I advise you to study. Even though estudies is already conjugated in the present subjunctive to form, sometimes that indirect object pronoun te will be included in your main clause also to kind of give the person you're talking to or about or the reader, kind of give them a heads up for who the idea or the wish is going to be directed at. Here's another example. Le sugiero que él vaya a casa. And I put in parentheses here, I suggest to him that he go home. I can just say I suggest that he go home, but sometimes this will be a little bit more specific so that someone knows that what's being said or done directly to that person. And another example, les recomiendo que ustedes barran el suelo. I recommend to you guys that you sweep the floor. So it's not just that I'm recommending someone sweep the floor, it's that I want to be a little bit more specific that I am saying this to you specifically. Here's a couple of examples I want you to try. Basically, what you have in each of these sentences is you have your main clause provided, and you also have your connector. You'll notice in these sentences we're using the word que, meaning that, as our connector, and then you're given a verb in the infinitive form. Your job is to write down these sentences, these examples, but I want you to go ahead and conjugate that verb in parentheses in the present subjunctive tense. And so then if you also want to write the English meanings out to the side or something like that, you can, because these will serve as examples for you. We're going to do the first one together, and then I want you to pause the video, try numbers 2 through 7 on your own, and then once you've done them, then you can unpause and I will reveal the answers for you. So number 1, te sugiero que, so we know that I am suggesting to you that you do something, specifically that you go with her to the supermarket. And so we want to put that verb ir in the to form, and that would be the subjunctive. So that's going to be vayas. Okay? At this point, I want you to pause the video, complete numbers 2 through 7 on your own, and then, like I said, you can unpause and I will show you the answers. Okay, now that you've had a chance to try those on your own, let's check your work and see how you did. Number 2, using the complete sentence, including the subjunctive verb, you should have él necesita que yo le preste dinero. Número 3, no queremos que tú hagas nada especial para nosotros. Número 4, mis papás quieren que yo limpie mi cuarto. Número 5. Nos piden que ayudemos a preparar la comida. This one is a little bit tricky, so if you weren't sure on this one, don't worry, I actually had to do a double take on that one as well. The reason you know that ayudemos has to be in the nosotros form is because that indirect object pronoun nos was indicated in the main clause before the conjugated verb piden. Okay, continuamos con número 6. Quieren que tú saques la basura todos los días. If you remember, in the last lesson, 12.3, we reviewed those spelling changes that can happen in the subjunctive, which would be like the car, gar, zar verbs. The C changes to a Q, U. So you might double check your spelling on that one. And then the last one, número 7, is different than all of the others. I hope you caught on to that and notice that there is no connector in number 7. There's not even 2 separate clauses. There's just one. The subject is yo consistently. So it's just yo quiero descansar esta noche, which refers to that rule we talked about a little bit ago, where if there's only one subject, you simply use the infinitive verb and the subjunctive is not required. So I hope you did okay on those 7 examples. We'll have more practice in class next time, but this is just to kind of get you started and kind of get a feel for how this structure